introverts destined to be less happy? Or is there more to the story than meets the eye? Hello, listeners. Welcome to The Science of Self, where you improve your life from the inside out. Today is the 5th of September, 2025. Happy Friday. Today's featured book from Peter Hollins is The Science of Introverts. Explore the personality spectrum for self-discovery, self-awareness, and self-care. Design a life that fits. This audiobook, incidentally, was the first book that I narrated for Peter Hollins way back in 2018. So if the narration sounds a little old-fashioned, I apologize for that. But still, it's great information, and I enjoyed the book a lot. Hope you will too. For today's episode, we're pulling from the beginning of Chapter 3, entitled The Pursuit of Happiness. In this first half of the chapter, we discuss the difference in happiness levels between introverts and extroverts. Are extroverts inherently happier than introverts? Well, that's the myth. But in this episode, we're going to look at research that shows that extroverts may report higher happiness, but they may not actually experience it that way. We'll look at the concept of how extroverts might have a positivity bias, so they downplay their negativity in their self-reports. Cheaters. Well, that and a lot more useful information in today's episode. So, introverts, perk up, listen closely. Extroverts, you can listen too. Thanks for being with us today. Generally speaking, happiness is a feeling or a state of being that encompasses contentment, pleasure, joy, satisfaction, fulfillment, and well-being. We can define it any number of ways, but we all want it and will go to the ends of the earth searching for happiness, or at least to avoid unhappiness. The jury is still out on which of the two is more motivating. Most of the time, a person's happiness is thought of as a primary component of their general temperament. They're just a happy person, or they're kind of a buzzkill, aren't rare things to hear. A person's happiness can also be a product of people's experiences, current mood, or simply the faces that they allow others to see. It's a multifaceted trait that, like most things, cannot be defined by a single quantity alone. Surprisingly, where you find yourself on the introvert-extrovert spectrum also seems to have a marked effect on your overall happiness. Are there measurable differences in happiness between introverts and extroverts? Who is destined for a happier, more fulfilling life? Can how our social batteries recharge truly be responsible for happiness? Well, to start with, it doesn't only apply to human beings, which lends credence to this correlation. As it turns out, certain animal groups also exhibit differences in social assertiveness and aggression. Take, for example, ring-tailed lemurs. Irish researcher Ipek Kulisai examined them for several years at a lemur program in the state of Georgia. She observed their behaviors in a few areas: aggression, grooming, contact calling, and the ever-popular scent marking. It turns out lemurs have personalities and are also divisible by whether they're extroverts and introverts. The more social, extroverted lemurs were much more involved in excitable interactions, but they also had a tendency to get into more fights than others. You might characterize them as having higher highs and lower lows than more introverted lemurs. Studies on gorillas have also found marked differences between gorillas of different personalities, this time in relation to overall lifespan. This was confirmed in a 2012 study by the University of Edinburgh, who studied the temperaments of 298 gorillas in captivity over the course of 18 years. Researchers found that gorillas who were extroverted, those who showed curiosity, gregariousness, and playfulness, were the ones who lived longer lives, regardless of gender or any other factor. The finding fell in line with an early 2012 study of humans who had lived past the age of 100. That study, too, declared that extroverts and positive people were more likely to hit triple digits in age than those with introversion and more social isolation. At this point, your intuition is probably telling you that extroverts are happier in general, and your intuition is correct. Extroverts have an innate desire for higher quantity and greater intensity of interpersonal interaction. They're generally more active, seek out stimulation more often, and have a high capacity for joy. People who identify as extroverts are often described as sociable, active, talkative, person-oriented, optimistic, fun-loving, and affectionate. Typical descriptions of introverts, on the other hand, include reserved, sober, exuberant, aloof, task-oriented, retiring, and quiet. Of the two, extroverts quite clearly sound like they would be more drawn to happiness and joy, or at least experiences that create those emotions. They're out and about and have more opportunities to experience joy and amazing circumstances involving others. You'll read later on that extroverts self-report as having more relationships and sexual encounters, which supports that assertion. If happiness is at all related to the external world, then the extrovert has quite a leg up in terms of exposure and opportunity. There's the old saying that showing up is half the battle, and extroverts certainly fulfill that requirement. But perhaps extroverts aren't merely more comfortable expressing themselves openly, while introverts don't share as readily. If one group is predisposed to be more social and open, it would make sense that they appear more emotional. Thus, are extroverts merely paying lip service and being more emotionally expressive, though not necessarily better off? Time and again, behavioral psychologists have found that extroverts who take well-being surveys self-report as being happier than introverts do on the same surveys. Such studies can be informative. However, we can't necessarily accept them at face value, given that the results are self-reported and extroverts are inherently more likely than introverts to describe themselves as happy. Typically, surveys having to do with personality type focus on 5 core personality traits that were researched and developed by D.W. Fisk beginning in 1949 and have become more widely supported since that time. These have since become known as the Big 5 personality traits, and the model of viewing personality in 5 separate scales has gained widespread acceptance. Each trait functions on its own scale. As it happens, the Big 5 personality traits and the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator are the 2 most prominent ways in which introversion or extroversion is defined and measured. You can use the acronym OCEAN to help you remember the 5 traits, as listed and described below. Openness to experience, inventive, curious, versus consistent, cautious. Would you be willing to take a chance on a big career opportunity if it requires moving to a new city and starting over with a new social circle? What about showing up to a party where you only know the host or perhaps nobody at all? Conscientiousness, efficient, organized, versus easygoing, careless. How much time do you spend planning and organizing your life? Do you consistently reflect on goals and desires for personal outcomes, or do you prefer to just be yourself and do what comes naturally and let the rest work itself out? Extroversion, outgoing, energetic, versus solitary, reserved. Does socializing typically energize or drain you? Do you prefer external stimulation, or do you spend a lot of time analyzing and introspecting? Of course, this is the personality trait we are most interested in measuring. It simply can't be done in a vacuum without giving consideration to other traits. Agreeableness, friendly, compassionate, versus challenging, detached. Do you tend to get along with most people you socialize with and always prefer positive interactions? Do you often challenge people when you engage with them? Do you prefer to remain detached and unemotional in social interaction? Neuroticism, sensitive, nervous, versus secure, confident. Are you sensitive to how people perceive and think about you? Does interacting with people you aren't comfortable with make you nervous? Are you generally secure in yourself and confident in social situations? Ryan Howell, a psychologist from San Francisco State University, conducted a study that may lend more insight on this subject. 754 students were identified as being more introverted or extroverted, then asked to complete a series of online questionnaires on personality, life satisfaction, and personal memories. The results of the study show that those individuals who identified as extroverts were more likely to recall good things from the past and downplay the bad relative to the introverts studied. Moreover, this positive outlook on past experiences explained the 45% correlation between extroversion and greater life satisfaction. For more neurotic types, the tendency to take a more negative view of the past explained the 50% correlation between their personality type and happiness level. What can we conclude from this? The findings of this study essentially show that extroverts have a special tip for being happier and more optimistic. They literally forget negativity or otherwise choose not to fixate on it. They experience it, to be sure, but it either doesn't stick in their long-term memory or it doesn't ruin their outlook and memories. Does this mean they had happier lives? Not necessarily. Perhaps they did as a result of extroverted tendencies that place them into happiness's path, or perhaps there's something about increased socialization that allows extroverts to mentally move onto greener pastures, so to speak. This whole concept will be foreign to introverts. It certainly sounds nice, in theory, to focus on the positives and forget the negatives in life, but that's not a conscious choice they can make. Recall that introverts have the tendency to be stuck in their own heads, without the natural impulse to seek support and positivity from their environments. If introverts are somewhat more resistant to the influences of the external world, then they have nothing to soothe them and either remind them that everything is going to be all right or point out the bright side of things. So extroverts self-report as happier and more fulfilled. Is there anything we can do to even the scales? Can introverts only understand that their very nature compounds negativity and decreases happiness? If the goal is happiness, introverts should attempt to let things go. This can often end up feeling like you're just suggesting that someone grow taller or change their facial structure. It seems rather dreary and bleak, but it reflects reality. We've now established some evidence that extroverts are indeed happier, whether it's because of their life perspective or their greater number of opportunities for happy occasions. Psychologists Guido Olermans and Arnold Baker also conducted a study exploring the link between happiness and extroversion, this time focusing on how different actions impact introverts and extroverts. They recruited more than 1,300 people and asked them to keep track of their daily activities and to describe their feelings at the time. When the final tallies came in, they had collected data on nearly 14,000 activities across some 5,600 days. The researchers found that different types of activities were more meaningful depending on whether you are an introvert or extrovert. Extroverts particularly favored rewarding activities like being paid to work, exercising, or winning a competition. When these rewarding activities were coupled with social interaction, the subsequent happiness level rose even higher. On the opposite side of the spectrum, introverts were more responsive to punishments and other negative situations, which made them unhappier. Extroverts were more emotionally affected by positivity and happiness, while introverts were more emotionally affected by negativity and unhappiness. The theory that extroverts are happier as a result of being more responsive to rewards was first published by Gray in 1982. The theory was later supported by Larson and Ketelaar in 1991 when their research found that extroverts consistently reacted more strongly to positive situations than introverts did. It's a theme we're beginning to see develop. Introverts are not wired to look on the bright side of things. If you were constantly scanning and analyzing, you might not either. It's as if an extrovert's mood could be raised by receiving ice cream, whereas it would take a 5-course meal to raise the introvert's mood. Positivity doesn't move the needle for the introvert nearly as much. But overall, this might not be a statement about happiness, but rather probability. A study conducted in 1985 by Hetty found that extroverted people have greater chances to experience favorable events, like falling in love, for example, in their lives. Extroverts engage in more interaction and experiences in general, so it follows that they will have more positive experiences as well. This is actually encouraging. Less socially active individuals who want to be happier can bring more happiness into their lives by simply being more willing to go out and engage. Increasing the sheer volume of experiences doesn't ensure that all of them will be positive, but a proportionate amount probably will be, which increases the amount of happiness you will experience overall, regardless of your personality type. If confidence and social skills do not come naturally to you, or if you simply want more of them, these are things that can be practiced and improved upon, regardless of your personality type. Take, for example, the story of one Jason Comley, originator of rejection therapy. After his wife left him for another man, Jason found himself unhappy and withdrawn from life, rarely socializing at all. He realized that his isolated lifestyle was exceedingly unhealthy and stemmed from a fear of rejection. So what did Jason do? Every single day for 1 year, Jason purposely got rejected. In doing so, he overcame his fear of rejection and became increasingly more confident and outgoing, reclaiming his happiness along the way. Jason's story may be a little extreme, but it provides one source of social proof that simply making the effort to engage in more social activity can have positive effects on your well-being and happiness. A more recent study conducted in 2012 by Zelensky, Santoro, and Whelan resulted in perhaps the most interesting findings. Like the previously mentioned studies, these researchers found that the extroverted way of thinking did indeed create more happiness. Contrary to the other studies, however, Zelensky did not ask participants to answer questions based on their personality types and position on the extrovert-introvert spectrum. Instead, they had all of the participants use a script to behave as stereotypical extroverts and another script to behave as stereotypical introverts. They found that both the extroverts and introverts in the study reported feeling happier when they acted like extroverts. This would appear to definitively proclaim extroverts as the happier personality type. Unfortunately, when we take a deeper look at the design of the study, we see that this may not be the case still. When the participants were behaving as extroverts, they were told to be bold, talkative, energetic, active, and assertive. Fair enough. But when it came time to take on the behavior of introverts, participants received a script that instructed them to be reserved, quiet, lethargic, passive, compliant, and unadventurous. This represents an antiquated version of introversion and does not accurately describe many people who have mostly introverted tendencies. It's a negative stereotype that we have proven is simply untrue. There are few, if any, people in this world who actively desire to be lethargic, passive, compliant, and unadventurous, don't you think? Contrary to the script, introverts can certainly be talkative, and as you may have observed, there are many who are. And if you get an introvert talking about something that they are passionate about, they can be as energetic and assertive as anybody else. To be a truly definitive study, it would have evaluated people based only on their social capacity, what they do when they are tired, when their social battery is low. That being said, we shouldn't dismiss the study altogether. Putting the information from all of the studies mentioned in this chapter together, what can we say about the pursuit of happiness? If you're an extrovert, just being yourself and consistently seeking out social engagement ought to do the trick. For introverts, on the other hand, if you don't want to increase your volume of social interaction, you can change how effectively that interaction results in your happiness by behaving more similarly to an extrovert. Rather than analyzing and thinking your way through, try to be present in the moment and engage energetically and confidently with the people around you. People will receive you better, and you will literally feel better by trying to embody those traits. Another factor to consider in this grand equation of happiness is the role that being accepted in society plays. Western societies certainly seem to value extroversion and its associated behaviors above introversion, and so extroverts may naturally feel better knowing that they fit the ideal mold. They don't feel the need to change themselves. This works the opposite way for introverts. They can be made to feel as if they need to change or, worse, fake their personalities to be accepted. It does seem that extroverts have the edge when it comes to happiness. Indeed, the last study proved that popular conception of extroverts is positive, while our conception of introverts is moody at best. Lest you think that happiness is what matters, there's one final wrinkle. Too much sociability doesn't mean that every day is a never-ending party. Consider the primary objective of the introvert when they are tired, staying at home and watching television alone. While that kind of quiet relaxation certainly has its benefits, scientists have found that too much social isolation can be a significant health risk, and this is something that comes all too naturally to introverts. Brigham Young University researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad reviewed data from a large number of health studies that included results from over 3 million people. These studies specifically contained information pertaining to loneliness, social isolation, and living by one's self. Unsurprisingly, she found that people in active relationships experienced healthier lives and courted fewer risks to their well-being than those who were isolated. In fact, Holt-Lunstad's findings contained at least a degree of alarm. She found that the mortality risk of lonely people is as serious as those of alcoholics or moderate smokers. Even worse, lonely people are more likely to face an early demise than people suffering from obesity. She also determined that young people who are closed are more susceptible to health dangers than older people who lived alone. Having simulated closeness with others online didn't help much either. Holt-Lunstad found that romantic relationships were actually damaged if the couple engaged in text messaging more than actual, up-close and personal communication. Sorry, introverts, picking up the phone and making plans is sometimes necessary. However, the other extreme, having a limitless supply of social contacts, isn't healthy either, according to renowned anthropologist Robin Dunbar. He analyzed data from a staggering 6 billion telephone conversations from an unidentified country in Europe. After filtering out business calls, as well as calls from people who just didn't use the phone that often, Dunbar looked for patterns in how many times people returned phone calls from certain people. Dunbar had earlier claimed that the average person could only manage consistent social relationships with 150 people at one time, with some people being closer than others, of course. The results from Dunbar's telephone survey, however, claim that when it comes to closer personal friendships, we can only really handle about 5 of them at any given time. That's about as many people as you could fit into a compact car with a reasonable degree of comfort, driver included. It almost makes it seem like extroverts are using a lot of wasted motion and energy when they can only really have 5 close friends anyway. Of course, that doesn't mean they are any less happy. Here's the primary takeaway from today's episode. Happiness. It's different for everyone, and the only thing we know is that we want it. That, or we want to avoid unhappiness. Either will suffice most of the time. There's a marked difference in happiness levels between introverts, who are sadder, and extroverts, which are happier. You might consider 2 paths. 1, extroverts have a greater probability of being exposed to happiness-inducing events. Or 2, extrovert tendencies stemming from biological differences cause extroverts to evaluate their lives in more positive ways. And there you have it, folks, a look into the science behind happiness and how personality might play a role. Whether it's those extroverts' penchant for social interaction or a deeper-rooted difference in perception, one thing is clear. The pursuit of happiness is a universal human experience. But remember, happiness isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's about embracing the experiences that bring you joy, big and small. We'll leave you today with this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams.